And Sanju will ask you a question because, I'm not talking about the politics here. Keep that politics aside. I just want to ask you because many members from my own ilk have raised very strong questions, and I do it on that account. And I'll ask you a question. We talk about the G20 with so much pride. Tell me one country that has hosted the G20 has actually raided an organization or, carried out surveys in an organization like the BBC. What's the message that we are sending across?
Preeti, let's be very clear. I love coming on your shows. I've had, verbal fisticuffs with you and with Rajdeep. That said, let me be honest with you that, when you say what right does BBC have, and when Rajdeep says, in a year in which we have the G20 presidency, does it not send out a wrong message because optics and timing are everything in politics? Yes, Rajdeep, for once I agree with you. Perception, optics and timing are everything in politics. And because you said timing is important, let me just educate you in 10 seconds. Before a search is conducted, I'm not even talking, of a full-fledged raid. Before a basic survey or a search is conducted, there is a process. Income Tax Department first sends you a notice under Section 142(1) of the Income Tax Act. You are given within a week or 2 months to respond. If you don't respond after 3 repeated, requests/warnings, then you are asked to appear with all your accounting data at the JTO's office. JTO is your local jurisdictional tax officer's office. If you repeatedly refuse to answer questions posed by the Income Tax Department under Section 142(1), then, only then, if you repeatedly refuse to cooperate with the tax authorities, it is then that a survey followed by a search and seizure is conducted. So the BBC story came out about 3 weeks back, which means that income tax was already probing BBC Delhi and BBC Mumbai more than 2 months back. Because a 2-month time period is given before a survey is conducted, Preeti. So it is not that BBC...
The fact is the BBC has given out a statement. They are saying they are cooperating fully.
Do you believe the BBC? Don't you believe our tax authorities, Preeti? I want to ask you a simple question.
Please ask. I'll ask you a counter question. Ma'am, I will ask you a counter question. Okay, you ask me a question, let me answer it. Do I believe my tax authorities? Ma'am, now you've asked me a question. Let me ask a counter question. I have every right as a journalist to question my tax authorities. Every right in the world. Including the charge of vendetta.
Every right to question BBC if BBC is violating transfer pricing laws.
Sure.
You make it sound like BBC is functioning in an oasis of isolation.
Ma'am, nobody is making it sound like... Ma'am, 1 second. Nobody is making it sound like that.
I gave you. BBC is not above the law of the land.
Ma'am, nobody is above the law of the land.
Just one question. Preeti, one question, please. You are very tolerant. Sanju Verma may be intolerant. Rajdeep and Preeti are very tolerant journalists.
Ma'am, you're making this... Ma'am, let me introduce you a Sachin who's sitting who hasn't even spoken a word. Yes.
Preeti, you and Rajdeep together is, as it is, nothing less than intimidation for Sanju Verma.
Ma'am, if you're trying to say, ma'am, all I can say is if there are journalists who are sitting here and they're not standing up for journalism, then it's a crime shame. Then it's a crime shame, and I hope, madam, I hope you agree. Because the fourth pillar, as far as we have grown up looking at, is what we stand for.
You've asked me
so therefore we'll ask questions. Ma'am, you've come, 2 interventions have been made by you.
Let me ask you one question.
Ma'am, you already asked me.
Preeti, this is not
ask
fair.
me another, ma'am. It's not about me, but ask me.
This is not fair, Preeti. When I ask you as a representative of the media space.
Madam,
I'm
please
not asking Preeti Chaudhary personally. Can I please finish, Preeti? Thank you. Is BBC over and above the law of the land? Do income tax rules and Income Tax Act, does it not apply to a company or a subsidiary which is operating in India?
Ma'am, you asked me a question. Is the BBC above the... Ma'am, now it's not about you and I. Madam, it's not about you and I. It is not about you and I. Is the BBC above the law of the land? No. Is Sanju Verma or Preeti above the law of the land? No. Ma'am, one second. Okay, may I open up the debate? You're asking me a question.
Why don't you trust the income tax department?
Here, ma'am, I have every right.
Why don't you trust our income tax
Can I
department,
just get, ma'am, you know, you're not allowing you don't want an answer, it seems.
No,
that's the
you
problem.
are not
Then
willing
allow
to
me to
trust our tax
answer.
department.
Ma'am, if you keep quiet, only then I can answer. If you keep quiet.
No, you said enough. You've said enough.
Ma'am, I'm the moderator of this debate. I'm the moderator of this debate. Nobody is above the law of the land, but questions will be asked, especially if timing is suspect. It's my job as a journalist. Having said that, now I've asked you as a journalist, let's make this debate slightly political, because what is the Congress and the opposition saying, Tehseen? That there is an attempt to gag freedom of expression inside Parliament and to gag the pen outside.
Good evening, Preeti. Good evening, Rajdeep, and to all my fellow panelists and the viewers. Two very simple things. I think somebody in the Honorable Prime Minister's office is completely misleading the Honorable Prime Minister. Let's look at the sequence of this documentary. When this documentary came out, 6 days before it was banned or they attempted to ban it, everybody that I knew of had nothing to say about the documentary, because everything said in that documentary was already said, and the Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister, got a clean sheet from the Supreme Court. Suddenly this government comes out with hammers against a documentary trying to ban it, thereby making the documentary news. Now this documentary is forgotten, there's another agenda, and suddenly they go and conduct this survey, raid, have what you may. Let's assume what Sanju ji is saying is absolutely right. So were they seeing transfer documents in the phones of journalists by seizing phones of journalists? So journalists who are working today, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, 8 years ago, this case against the BBC or this investigation that had started, or this lookout on the BBC that had started, this transfer lookout, they were seeing in phones of journalists who are working today in the BBC. That is how they expect to reach some sort of logical conclusion. What are they doing? All they're trying to do is they're trying to bully people, like Rajdeep said, terribly in a year when India has the G20 presidency. You cannot hunt with the hound and run with the hare, or run with the hare and hunt with the hound. It doesn't work. You cannot go to the United States of America and say India is the mother of all democracies, we encourage freedom of speech, and send your goons, and I'm using this work with a lot of responsibility, to intimidate people by taking their phones, by closing their doors and intimidate journalists. That won't work. You cannot expunge speeches from Parliament.
I do agree. Let's not call anybody goons. I agree, madam. Ma'am, I agree. Okay, taken. And yes, I think we should abstain from name calling.